to our next installment at Stein Wealth Advisors of our featured professional series. Today, we are featuring Sarah Brelowski. Sarah is in her former life, an IT auditor and IT security and data privacy manager. Currently, she is a mother extraordinaire to her son, Dom, taking a little bit of time for him. But Sarah, I've always heard stories growing up with you about your professional life and your travels all over the world. And I knew it was pretty complicated from an IT standpoint and all that. Can you better explain a little bit about your background so we understand it? And then we'll get into some of our things that we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me today.
Cool.
So I'm a little different on the security side because I came from audit. I'm not the tech person. I'm not the person you call that when your computer breaks down. So what I've done in my career is I've always looked at process, risk, and mitigation of those. So when I was in my audit, it was a lot of crossover with IT security to create better processes, to better understand our data, where it's at, how to protect it. And then so when I made the switch from audit to IT security, when the CIO brought me over, made my first jump, his comment was, now you can fix all the stuff you told us was broken, which that was exciting. So, but it was a really awesome opportunity, and it wasn't just that first one. Every role that I've had, because of that mixed background, I've always been in the data privacy world. So in that first role, I'll get into some stories that I've had, but it was really, how do we start protecting our data it was a global company. How do we encourage our employees to be safe? And in that, it was global. So it wasn't just the US perspective, and actually getting out and understanding more about European Union and Germany and Asia kind of changed the way I viewed privacy. And as you know, every time we talk, I always bring up something about data security or data privacy in our conversations. So I am a certified information systems auditor, but turned IT security professional, manager, implementer.
So you know what you're talking about, and you've audited these things. Are you? And I don't know, but you've traveled the globe talking and speaking and consulting on these things, so you have a fairly wide breadth for a young professional in this field. I would stress to say that.
Yes.
Okay.
Given a similar version of this presentation all over the world. It's weird to say. Some in person, Europe, I did it in person, and with the Asia Pacific folks, I did it virtually. Before that was a cool thing.
Well, I know you have a ton of stuff to cover, but a little bit of housekeeping. Like we said, if you have any questions for Sarah or Josh and myself that you think we can address, please drop it in the chat. If you have anything you think we should speak more about, Sarah has a whole bunch of things to speak on, but I'm going to let her go. Josh, anything to add before we give Sarah the floor and she can get going?
No, I'm good.
All right, great. All right, ma'am, I'm going to make you the host. I believe you're still spotlighted, or spotlit, I think is the word, but carry on with your presentation and all that good stuff. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So this, just to kind of level set what I'm going to talk about today, it's a little different than what you would probably imagine most data security and privacy trainings are. Because of the background that I previously mentioned, I'm more process oriented. And so I come at it from not a technical, you must do, you should do. My personality, when you tell me that, is I'm not going to do it. So I like to explain things in a different perspective so people can make their own choices and their own decisions. And then there's so many, you just Google this stuff and you can find the answers, but it's understanding what works for you is the most important part. So starting with some fundamentals, I want to start with what privacy is. So I'm going to look down because I copied the Webster definition, so I would not mince words. So per Webster, privacy by definition is freedom from unauthorized intrusion and one's right to privacy. So that's a pretty loaded statement. Privacy is very complicated in this world. Privacy 20 years ago would be a lot easier than it is today, right? There's a huge movement currently around the world to make privacy a human right, basic human right, which as Americans, that's weird, right? That's strange. Why would privacy be a human right? So if we look in our history, very rarely have we had our privacy severely imposed. You may have had a diary or a journal when you were younger, or maybe a note in school that somebody read, and for that brief little time, your privacy was violated. But what came out of that, maybe you had a crush, maybe you liked somebody, it wasn't life-changing. And I'll focus on Germany, just because when I worked with our German counterparts, that is what changed my view of privacy the most. And I'm not going to get into the history of Germany. I think we're all pretty much aware. But one of the lasting effects of it is they are really trailblazing the privacy, right? They understand what happens when your privacy is violated. So when I was talking about, one of the projects I was on, this is an example of how different the world views privacy. In the US, I implemented, implemented an application that had nothing to do with employees' personal lives. It was strictly business. We put it into the US, no problem. We didn't have to tell anybody we did it. We just installed it, turned it on. Canada, Mexico, pretty much the same thing. Then we got to Europe, and France and the Netherlands. There are a few other countries. They had something called a Works Council. And the Works Council, basically, they were like the go-between, like think of unions, leadership. And we just had to tell them, hey, we're going to put this application in. Here's what it does. Now, there were some translation issues, so we had to work through those. But they would basically just needed to be informed. And then we went to Germany, and it was an 18-month process with Germany. We had to change policies and procedures specifically for German employees. We had to communicate and had all of the German employees acknowledge that this system was going in place. Now, again, the system was not anything related to personal data. It was actually trying to protect them. And in that, we had this whole 18-month process. And we thought, well, maybe because it was the first time we did it, that we did it wrong. And I was at a conference, and it was, everyone pretty much said that has done this project, it's 18 months, because they want to know what you're doing. The employees need to be told what they're doing. They need to understand it. You need to be very clear about the processes around the application. And that shook me a little bit, because here we were, we turned it on. We didn't even tell anybody. So it's very interesting. And I think most people are aware that the European Union has been leading a lot on privacy when it comes to business, right? So like how you guys manage my data and my privacy rights, how do you protect them? So they're really leading that, and it's kind of gotten a lot of traction with other countries saying, you know what, this is right, this makes sense. I have a right to protect my privacy. I would say when you think about it in the US, the conversation is very different. When you think about how we think about privacy, it's a headline, there's a breach, next day we're on to the next subject, right? I like to use the analogy of recycling. The story goes with recycling, the companies knew recycling was problem. So they marketed that it was our responsibility to be the good stewards and to recycle and to make sure we were using the products that they should be. And I would say the same thing has gone with privacy. It's pushed back on us to protect our data, but they're the ones that are maintaining it, right? You're collecting it, you're processing it, and you're retaining it, and you're destroying it. And I have no control over that. So that's kind of how I view privacy, at least a little bit, is I think there's a lot of outward pressure. And so as normal Americans, we don't really think about what should people be doing with my data? So I encourage people, if they're not familiar with the General Data Protection Regulation, often known as GDPR, you should understand it because it's really great. I remember I was in this role when they were starting to talk about rolling out this regulation, and everybody was like, "Oh, this is going to be so much work." And I sat there and I thought, like, this is really good. Like from a business perspective, it was hard and there was a lot of work. But from like a person perspective, I'm like, yeah, like this makes sense. Like, and sometimes people in these roles have to understand that what is good for business may not be good for the person, and what's good for the person may be a little bit more difficult for the business. So just highlights of what the GDPR is basically saying when they collect data from you, you have the right to know why they're taking your data, what they're doing with your data, how they're going to manage your data. And it's all in simple terms. It's not this legalese that people, spew out there or a copy and paste from someone else's. I don't know if you've been to like the BBC website, but if you've noticed on European websites now, the cookies are different, right? It's not all cookies. There's 2 sets of cookies. So the good news is that at least there's some traction coming. We have a very similar legislative proposal that has been brought up. This is, I think, the second time it's been brought up. And it's kind of copying what the GDPR says. We need to know where our data is. Now, that's kind of on the business side, right? So how do businesses take it? But I also want to talk about how we view privacy, right? Those conversations don't typically occur. You don't sit around your fireside chat and say, so how do you feel about privacy? What makes you warm and fuzzy? We just don't talk about it. Mostly because we take it for granted, unless you've spoken to someone who's had their identity compromised, and then you'll get the total extreme of it, right? So the way I like to approach these things is really to say, what's your risk tolerance? What are you accepting? You will have people that say you need to do this list of 30 things, and your data will be secure, your privacy will be secure. But is that appropriate for you? That's like me coming to you, Joe, and saying, Joe, I want my entire portfolio to now be GME. You may put some AMC in there, right? And you say, Zara, that's really risky, but maybe that's what I want. That maybe my tolerance is super risky because I want to go to the moon. I want to donate to the gorillas and the apes. But maybe that's not right for the next person, right? Maybe they want stocks that are a little more conservative, a little less volatile. Privacy is the same way, in my view. What works for me may not work for Josh, may not work for Joe. It's all what you accept and what you're willing to accept. But what I like to tell people is the risks, because I don't think you can protect your privacy without understanding the risks associated. So one of the things that I think is interesting is if you think about a house, right? Houses have doors, front, back, garage, sometimes, and windows. And we try to lock all those things, right? And when a guest comes over, you typically want your guest to come into the front door, right? Because you can control that entrance. Privacy is kind of like the same thing. Where's my data? Where am I sending my data to out of my house? Am I sending it out the window? In a lot of cases, I could be. Am I controlling it out the front door? And what am I okay with? Maybe I'm okay with, putting it out the window, but I have a curtain over it, so only some of it gets out.
Sarah, what would be some examples of windows, like Facebook or things like that? I mean, is it?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So that's good. So I'll just move right to that. So Facebook and social media. So it's crazy, right? Joe, I think you and I were some of the first on Facebook, right? In college back in the day. It was like 2005 and it was fun. I stopped writing letters to my friends. We were all on Facebook. Facebook has
Josh had MySpace. He's older.
Facebook has morphed over the last, 15-ish years that it's been there. And it's a treasure trove of data. And when you go back to what privacy, like, let me scroll back up to what privacy is, right? It's, freedom from unauthorized intrusion, right to privacy. So this is where privacy really starts to get murky because there's a public company I'm posting my data to I have an expectation that they're protecting my stuff, but their goal is to make money. Everybody's goal is to make money. And they do that by then selling some of my data or using it for ads and that sort of thing. The social media is also very complicated because a lot of us look at them independently. So we have, the famous LinkedIn's your profession, Facebook's for your friends, Instagram's for your photography, and Twitter's for your ramblings, right? But when somebody wants, for whatever reason, to get at you, to attack you, if they put those together, they can build a pretty good picture about you, right? So we'll leave nuggets in LinkedIn, and we will leave nuggets in Instagram and Facebook, and that we're vulnerable in that respect, right? And social media, it's a platform that people typically use as a happy path, I would say. So when I do processes, we always flow out the happy path. And then I always say, well, what if it's not? And typically, like when you talk about social media, the negative, oh, that's like this or that's like that. It wouldn't happen to me, but the reality is the abuse of social media is a lot more common than I think people know and understand. And you give a lot of it away for free. If people don't, there's a couple of nuggets I want people to take from this, but one of them is a survey is not going to tell you what golden girl you are or what character you are. Or, we were talking about the artwork earlier I just saw a new one. It's like, what do you see in this picture? What people sometimes don't understand is when they engage in those, they sign over their right to their contacts, their pictures, their history, their content. That whoever made that survey, they didn't really care how many Blanches are in the world. They just got a whole lot of data for free.
So sorry if I could jump in real quick. So, and I think that it's, Josh, maybe you could reaffirm this, but I believe that the way and how much people are, whether they're low-level compromises or even higher-level compromises, as far as your Facebook, somebody took over your Facebook and messaged all your people. We see that a lot where we'll get messages from people that are clearly not them. We see email, like phishing is quite frequent. I think we could talk about phishing and people building an identity profile on you. And I think those are two of the ways that are most common those are the most common attacks I would say you see, but what are the common ways? I think people may get a little confused about the methods and like, why are they phishing me? Why are they building an identity on me? Or why are they trying to take my identity? And I think we know why people take identities, but I think if you could briefly kind of go through those and kind of why people do that stuff.
Yep. Because your data, right? That's what it all comes down to. When you think about like what's your most valuable asset, you might say your house, your wife, your dog. One of your most valuable assets is your data. Companies spend an absurd amount of money trying to get your data because it will drive, different behaviors. I do have a slide. We'll talk about phishing a little later, but I can tell you the story that is true. And this is why people should really be concerned when I say, they can build that profile. There was a guy that really liked BMWs, and on his Facebook page, even though his Facebook page was pretty private, his cover was him and his car at a dealership. He's proud, right? You could see that he was part of like a BMW fanatics group, whatever. But other than that, his Facebook was pretty locked down. Well, then you go to his LinkedIn and it had his company he worked for, where he worked, all that kind of good stuff. So there was an attack on him. It was a Friday afternoon, and this is why we'll go over some phishing like do's and don'ts. But they profiled this gentleman. They sent him an email. They faked an email address that looked like from the dealership that was in the picture, in his cover picture, and said, hey, why don't you come in this weekend or next week and test drive our new car? Here's a link to sign up. Friday afternoon, dude's half, checked out like most people are on Friday afternoon. Hey, if I can test drive a new BMW, I'm all about it. So he clicks the link. He was in a manufacturing company, and his manufacturing company was down for, I think, 5 to 7 days because whatever was in that link was malware and went through his system and shut his business down. So he thought, hey, getting a BMW test drive for free. And now it wasn't, the company was small enough that they didn't have a lot of good IT practices to prevent the mass spreading, but their manufacturing was actually shut down for those 5 to 7 days until they could get things back up and running. So people do it because they want your credit card information, because they want your health care information. Credit card information was selling cents per cent. It used to be a credit card used to be 20, 30 bucks. But the breaches have been so plentiful that that's really not as expensive it used to be, but it's the health data, especially because of some of the things that have happened in our country. Buying and selling health care information is pretty important. But yeah, people want it so that they can figure out if you're going to be home. So they can come look at your house. And if you're on these social media platforms posting about things in your house, maybe they want something in your house, right? So there's a lot of reasons, but it's always, shouldn't say it's always, a lot of time it's for less than desirable reasons that people want this. It could be because if you're in a certain part of the business and you're on a project that's secret, people might want to befriend you to get those secrets out of you, right? So there's a lot that people do. There's a lot of reasons why we call it spear phishing when it's a direct attack. And then there's phishing, which is in general. But I also want to talk to you a little bit, and this is one thing I think is common folk, I'll call us, that we don't always get about social media, is that I mentioned it's changed a lot in 15 years. Can you imagine what it's going to be in the next 15 years? And that's where my fear of how we use social media comes. I think social media is great and I use it. So, I've accepted some of the risks that happen, but I'm calculated in how I use it. So there's already been behavior analytics has become very popular. And this is where privacy is now starting to really need to stand its ground, because a few years ago, there was a guy, I don't know if you're familiar with this story. This is a great story. There was a guy, he went on his honeymoon with his Amex card. He left, his card had $10,000 on it. he came back, or 10,000 limit. He came back and it had $3,000 limit. And he called because he had issues with paying for his honeymoon, obviously. And they said, well, we know that people that shop at this particular place typically don't pay on time, so we reduced your credit limit. Now that caused obviously an uproar, because how could you make an assumption of me based on other people? But at that time, people were also talking about, well, I want access to people's social media to know if they're worth insuring. Like you say, no, I don't skydive, but maybe you're friends with a lot of people that do. So maybe you're inherently more riskier, or maybe you don't skydive, but you're in those groups, or,
There's an opportunity for discriminatory practices in one way, and we have to be cognizant of that. I appreciate that. Now, and I think that, and I don't know if you would endorse this or not, I feel like there was a movie that came out recently on this, The Social Dilemma, that kind of goes into some of these concerns and visualizes it. So if people are having trouble kind of understanding this, how data is used against you in various ways. And just like when, Josh or I or Melissa look at your risk, how are these risks applicable to your situation? And, Sarah, you have a young son, and people's access to that son or your family, and I see your nice things in the background with the family, like that's important to you, and as it should be to all of us, because it might not be you that it is affecting, it is you or your wife or son or daughter or what family members that are not necessarily wanting that risk that you might be comfortable taking on, right?
correct. Yeah, and when you talk about my son, it's very different now. He's 16 months old. I would say things very differently 20 months ago, right? I am the custodian of his privacy. I am responsible for managing his digital footprint. And this is an area that I'm very passionate about. There's a really good book called Catching the Catfisher by Tyler Cohen Wood, I think her name was. I heard her speak and she was phenomenal. And it was how parents inadvertently lead their children into bad situations using social media. Do I post my son on Facebook or Instagram? I do, but I'm very cautious on what I post. I think first I say, if my mom posted this of me, would I be happy? Because I think we've all seen pictures of kids maybe in mid tantrum, or they've gotten into something that, in 15 years could be really embarrassing. So I always preface like, would I be embarrassed? And then I always think like, who does this serve? What am I trying to get with this? So with the pandemic, it's been a little different. So I've tried to post a picture maybe every 3 months just to keep people up. Understanding that, yes, you could use like facial recognition, like you could develop, see how he's changed over those few months, and you could make a face on how he would. I'm okay with that risk. I think that's okay. What I'm not okay with is posting what park we go to, posting what, if I went to a daycare or if we went to like a library, what library we go to and when we go to. Even though I trust my privacy settings, there's still that what if, right? I think there was a lot of time when we would meet somebody for the first time and we'd be like, oh, let's be Facebook friends. And you're probably still Facebook friends with that person and you've never seen them and it's been 10 years, which I also advocate for continuing to go through your list and removing. But you also don't want that information used. So when it comes to posting, that's my biggest rules is, even when it's about myself, like in 10 years, am I going to be okay with this? And am I giving too much away? Am I giving something that somebody could use against me? I think, it's been beat very hard. I mean, don't post pictures of a vacation when you're on vacation, because that will tell people, hey, you're not home. So there's been some lessons that we've learned. And I think people are getting better I also think people are getting worse with saying things and not knowing how that's going to be used in 10 or 15 years. I mean, look at Kevin Hart and how, you know, he was going to be a present or an MC, and then that got taken away because people dug things up. So I think that's what we need to be cautious on, even though like we may not say things like what he was, you know, accused of and held against, but maybe you say something about your house. You know, you post a picture of your house. Hey, I just bought this house. Well, do you know how easy it is to go in and I know my friends have bought houses and they post about it, and I've been able to go find and see there's too much data to do that. So, you know, what are you accepting to risk? Are you okay with people now knowing what house you buy, how much you paid for it, now where you live, so that when you post other things, you can get a better profile of you, right? I can start to figure out what your house looks like. If I want to get in, where I'm going to get in. If I look through the pictures, does it look like there's a security system? Again, not doomsday. I use social media. I love social media for certain things, but you have to understand the ramifications of what we post. Most of us probably have friends that post pictures of just everything multiple times a day. And then the scariest thing is they have the little world. Everybody can see that. And there's very few instances in this life that I would need to share with the world something, right? I talk enough, I'm loud enough. I feel like that shares with the world. I don't need it to be recorded, because we also forget that once something is out there, even if we delete it, it's still there. There's people can still find it. And one of my nuggets too is once you post something, once you share, even like stuff that I share with you, Joe, I lose control of it. So when I send you my bank account information, I have now lost my control, and my control is going to you, right? So my expectation then is you're treating that with the same concern I would. With social media, you don't know who sees it all the time necessarily and what their intentions are. There was I think it was called Babies. Let me think. It was called Local Baby. It's a website called Local Babysitter. And they said that by the age of 18, most kids have 1,400 pictures of them on social media. I don't have 1,400 pictures of me probably most of my life. Out of that, 71% of parents said that something could happen because of those pictures, but don't worry about it, which is scary, because why do you think that you should be any different? So I caution people when they do share too much. Oversharing is a thing. I think they're calling it like parasharing or something. And it's just basically these parents that are oversharing, but it's also people do it about themselves too, right? Oh, I'm so upset. Oh, I'm this, I'm that. So we got to kind of think about those things. What are you putting out? And it will last the test of time. I was just involved in this. The Mario Lemieux Foundation did a challenge for 66 days of the new year to work out. It was fascinating to me the number of people that had their runs mapped. And I would scroll through, and this is something we don't think about. You could scroll through and you could pick out patterns of people, where they ran, where they started, where they at. That's a lot of data. And not only that, some of them had their heart rate data. Not that it matters to me, but I'm not their health insurer. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a life insurer, right? That doesn't matter to me if I see their heart rate data, but could somebody take that data and use it for reasons like the behavioral analytics? So think about those things. You know, I turned all that stuff off. I rode a spin bike and I didn't care if people saw how many miles in the time. I was okay with that. But when I took my walks, I made sure that data wasn't going, because you knew exactly where I lived. And for some people, it's very routine. So you can start picking up a pattern, right? So think of those things when we share. Social media just isn't, it is a tumultuous place. There are bad things that happen, but it's also good. But you just have to know what can happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like, and I very much appreciate your analogy with risk, and that's a main component of what we do as planners. And I appreciate your comments on the house. And it's not that you don't want to have house guests, right? We love house guests, and we want them to come over and enjoy our home and have them in. But I may not want my neighbors looking through my windows, so I want to pull my blinds down, and I want to lock those doors when the time's right. So those are good points. So we're about at halfway point, and I know you have some slides to share with us and some other more finite points. And I think you've adequately scared all of us. So I appreciate that. And I know that's not your intention, but it is unique because there is more access to more data, and there are more ways to use it in a manipulative fashion if somebody is not cognizant. So I do appreciate the scary stories, because it gives you that, like, oh my gosh, because my yard watches and they're tracking so much data now, that access, it goes so much further than just a phishing scam or I'm a prince of this country that doesn't exist or what have you, so I appreciate
Right.
Carry on. Thank you. Those are all great points so far. Thank you for the book reference. So
that's
so where to next? So we've covered.
Oh, wait. I think Josh was trying to say something.
Oh, sorry, Josh. I didn't see you there.
No, it's okay. Sorry. It's with these Zooms, sometimes it's hard to know when to get.
Put your hand up. Yeah.
But that's what's interesting to me. Joe, you had mentioned, thanks for scaring all of us. And it's funny because I think if we rewound 10 years from now, this call, this Zoom would be mostly about protecting financial security, email phishing, very what we almost consider now like common sense stuff around, hey, don't send your bank account number to people. If you get an email, don't click on the attachment. Obviously, it still certainly happens today, but it's much more commonplace, and that understanding of those risks are much more apparent. But now we have this whole social media public platform in many ways that opens up different doors. And so it's good to be scared because it means it's new. Whereas we may not be as scared about some of that other financial stuff because we've heard it a million times. We've built processes and systems, both personally as people and firms and companies have built all these firewalls in place to protect a lot of that. But the social media stuff is so new. It's good to hear this because it may open up opportunities for us to recognize risks that we didn't even know were risks. You mentioned like the parents posting stuff. Maybe they just had never thought about the fact that, you post enough pictures in your house, people can get a profile of, where your vulnerabilities are. And the probability of that is highly unlikely that something would happen from that, but it's still worth the consideration. So it's just times have changed. And Sarah, you had mentioned, what is it going to be 20 years from now? It's going to be different. Maybe
Right.
people will be reading our minds. I don't know. But what do we do about that? We'll have to wear like tinfoil hats, right? So that's all, just an interesting observation on my end of how new things have evolved into and how complicated they are and how multifaceted the scams have gotten, where, like you said, they're pulling stuff from a million different places to build this profile, and then they get what they need versus just like intercepting an email or an attachment or something like that. So,
And Josh, you brought up a point. I would say that the scariest thing currently about data breaches, at least in company perspective, is most data breaches currently, they take your data, right? I want to come in, I want your account info, I want what you have on all your clients, right? What if the breach wasn't to take your data, but to change it? Now, blockchain's gonna, help with that. But that is a very scary scenario to think about. And we take our privacy for granted. We take the integrity of our data for granted. So I am sometimes old school with my stuff. So I get papers because You can't, well, I mean, you can manipulate paper, but it's a lot harder than you can if I'm just saying, oh, everything's electronic. Because what if the electronic data got changed? So there are new things coming and there's new ways of doing it. And yes, everybody's making strides in protecting the data, but there's that lingering issue out there that hasn't really happened yet. But that's not because people aren't thinking about it. It just hasn't matured to where they can change your data. And that is scary. That's what scares me.
Can they make me taller on my driver's license?
I mean, I would do the same thing. But yeah, so Joe, I had some stuff I wanted to share.
Yeah,
So,
go ahead.
yeah, let me see if I can figure out how to do this.
So and Josh, good points there. I appreciate that. And yeah, those were well said. And it's not being scared, it's being aware, right? It's not that I'm scared of all these things. There you go. I can see it.
Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Yep. So we already talked a little bit about phishing and social engineering, the spear phishing. So this is all things where people have taken, in some instances where they've taken across your social media platforms and they're specifically targeting you. There was a story, they thought there was a data breach with the Army. There were some people that were found out where they lived. And what they found out later, it was because of all the social media posts that they put out there, that people were able to figure out where these service people work or lived. So these are basics, and these will never change with time. So unknown links in emails, texts, and direct messages, never click them unless you know where it's coming from. So if you get a text message that says, hey, sign up for yada, 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 don't click it. There's no need, right? If you think it's coming from a known source, pick up the phone and call them. Verify that that's what was sent. If you get a random direct message, don't say, oh, that looks like a fun little kitten, and click on it. Don't do that. Most of those are not going to end well for you. We also have this security that our mobile devices, so tablets, your cell phones, are somehow safer than laptops. It isn't true in some respects, but the malware, the spyware, those things can then also come onto your phones. So that's why I added text and direct messaging, because I think it's evolved into that, where before we used to say, oh, don't worry about your phones, you can't do anything, but that's not the case anymore. Attachments, again, unless you are expecting it, do not click it. People want you to click it because you can download in, right? It's an easy one for them to do. When you get these emails, these texts, if you notice grammar or spelling errors, that should be the first sign that says, ah. And there was a bunch of articles written a couple years ago about this specific point. And oftentimes most of us probably have responded and said, I'm not going to send my money to Nigeria or one of these countries, or you're not a prince of wherever, or princess. They're not looking for the people that recognize that there's grammar and spelling errors. They want the people that look at it and get excited. They want those vulnerable people. So you can send the emails back, but it's just for your satisfaction. You're not the person they're looking for. And lastly, carefully read the sender's email address. Their spoofing of email addresses has become pretty common. So when you get something from someone, maybe for the first time, or you're getting you just get a weird vibe, really look, get out your reading glasses if you need it, to make sure there's not an extra period, there's a S removed or added. Interestingly, just a few days ago, for my part-time job, I sent an email out and I got a response from someone whom I had been communicating with, and the email address was the person's name, and instead of the @ symbol, it was an ampersand. and then it was like whatever, like gmail.com or whatever it was. And it was an attachment and the grammar was a little bit off. And I had already interacted with this person, so it didn't make sense to me. And it was just really interesting to say, like, if I was tired, or if I wasn't in the right headspace, I might have clicked on that and done something. And that's also a key that I don't think, like, we often talk about these big four for phishing and social engineering. If you are tired, or if you are in a rush and there is an email that you are unfamiliar with, save it for later, because it's not worth the headache that you will have to undo what could have been, what may have happened, is a lot more than just giving yourself a second. So the next one is online shopping. These are, again, basic. Look for the HTTPS, that's the secure socket layer. And that just says your transaction is going to be safe. There are some browsers now that don't show you the address, so they show you something like the lock on the left. I copied that from, I think it was Chrome. But you want to look to see if there's some type of certificate, or that the lock or the HTTPS is there. Read the privacy policy. These are always really fun. They're always filled with legalese, but just try to figure out, if it's a place where you're not used to shopping. Double check the URL. Again, there's been a lot of spoofing of those. Make sure it's the one that you want. And if you're not sure, check for contact information. If you're buying from someone, there should be a way to contact them. Over the pandemic, I collect records. So I can listen to music and not be recorded. And there was a record store that had something I wanted, but if you know anything about record stores, they're not in the 21st century with their websites. So I did use one of my Facebook groups and I said, hey, has anybody ever bought from this shop? And people were like, oh yeah, da, 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 da. And I was like, okay, because if you saw the website, it looked like I made it in high school, right? They did have the contact information, but it just wasn't there. So you can, like, ask for people or look for reviews on the company, because there's a lot of things popping up. And for everything good, if there's an ad on social media that pops up for you to buy something, please do not just buy it. Due diligence on that, right? They are targeting you because they have your data, so they know some of your patterns. Some of them will not fulfill offers. Some of them will send you less than ideal product. So for those, look for reviews. If it's an established store that you're used to buying from, or that you know someone personally that's bought from, you can have some confidence, but these are some good gut checks to have. And when I want to talk about shopping too, and it's not on this screen, but I just want to fill it in real quick, is reward programs. They're pretty fascinating with data. So just know that every time that you get a new reward card, you get the 10%, 20%, whatever the deal is. On the back end, they're getting your data and your shopping habits so that they can target you. Target was really known for this because there was a girl that was pregnant. She hadn't told her dad yet. And they sent a package that said, congratulations, you're pregnant. And her dad called Target, was like, my daughter's not pregnant. It turned out she was. When I was pregnant, I specifically watched my Target ads change. And although it was not on the front, I noticed throughout my ads, there was more and more baby stuff that I would need at appropriate times. So it is very real. I'm not going to stop shopping at Target because I need it, but understand that when you sign up for those reward programs, you think, oh, they just have my email address, but they're also getting your shopping habits so they can target you. Traveling tips. I know we're not traveling right now, but when we do, a lot of these are for international, but keep in mind, clean off your devices. So any personal information you have on there, wipe them clean, back them up, reset them. Then when you come back, you can put your backup back on, and that goes for your tablets, your phones, your laptops. For everything good, turn off Bluetooth. There's no need to have Bluetooth on unless you are actively using it. That has always been a known vulnerability, and it is still a vulnerability. Also, turn off your Wi-Fi. When you're traveling to unknown places or places you've never been before, you don't want to just have open access to your phone, right? Turn it off. You don't want to connect to an open network. You want to have control over that. Refrain from using the security box in the hotel. If you don't believe in this, fake that you locked yourself out and have them come and lock it. And you'll notice there's a little hole that they put like a paper clip in that pops it open. If you're gonna have things that are worth something, keep them with you or keep them locked in a luggage, as I have down below, a luggage lock, but don't use a TSA one. Use something else, because the TSA keys can be either universal. So if somebody has one, it's easy to get in. When you're staying at an Airbnb or a hotel, make sure you know the Wi-Fi name exactly and join that one. There's, especially during conferences or times of, high travel, people will just rent rooms and set up fake Wi-Fis and take your data from you. So if your hotel is like Hotel 104, make sure you do not join 103 or 105 or 10.5. So be very careful when you do that. Again, this is for being abroad. Make sure you're always registered with an embassy, get the step notifications for the country, and understand those risks. We're not as accustomed to it, but there's a lot of pickpocketing that happens still. So one of my favorite tips is you just carry a fake wallet with your reward cards that you may or may not be using. So if somebody comes and tries to mug you, you give them, somebody has my Giant Eagle, I think a Blockbuster card was in it. And that my stuff is safe. They're happy because they think they got something that they didn't. In your hotel room, just use do not disturb. It's okay if your room's not clean. If you need towels, just call. If you need shampoo, call. But if you don't need to have somebody in your room when you're not there, then don't do it. There's too much opportunity. And then please remove all company identifying items. So people that travel, oh, this bothers me. When people travel around and they have like their company on their shirt, or they have their mugs, or they have their luggage tags, like that is great that you are proud, but now I am understanding who you work for, and maybe I am interested. And now maybe I will talk to you to get some information. I'll be friendly and innocent and see what I can get from you. Creating a strong password. This is my favorite. So like Josh said, we've been told things for years about creating a strong password. This is my favorite trick. Create a base password and then use the first 3 to 4 letters of the website that you're logging into and reverse them. So in this example, my base password is ABC123 with an exclamation point. So if I wanted to sign into Steinwell, maybe I do ETS ABC123 with an exclamation point. So why I do this, first off, I know accounts that I haven't logged into in years. I know how to log right back into them, and I don't have to worry about resetting a password and all that jazz. This requires me to not write my password down, because that is still a very real thing that people do. So if you have a base password that is easy for you to remember, if you just switch those 3 or 4 letters and reverse them, you don't need to write it down because you use that password for everything, right? What my advice for the 3 to 4 letters is typically when you look at a website, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Because when you go into sign, it's going to be, oh, this is the Steinwell advisor. Okay, so I know it could be IETS. For me, maybe it's ETS, right? So it could change, whatever your comfort level is. But this also, people talk about password managers a lot. There's good and there's bad about them, right? You're putting all your eggs in one basket in a company that you don't control. And that's fine. You may want that. You may want your browser to have all of your passwords because you just want to click a button, have your passwords filled out, or your credit card filled out, whatever it is. And that's great. But that's a risk. Are you willing to accept that risk? Me, I created a password. I'm not willing to accept that risk because if somebody were to ever get into my computer or if I walk away, that stuff is auto-filled and they can kind of do what they want. And that to me is a concern. That's a risk that I do not tolerate. But you might, Joe. Maybe you want it. And that's fair. This is not right or wrong. It's just what are you most comfortable with? And then password guidance. Do not write it down. Make it complex. So the easier it is, right, for you to make, probably the easier it is for it to crack. Refrain from using the same password. So if you're going to use ABC123 with an exclamation point, don't use that exact same one for everything, right? By switching the letters up front, and you can do your own variation. Maybe it's at the end, maybe it's in the middle. That was just an example. And this is not talked about enough, but enter the passwords on devices you own and you control, or your company does. So you're at the hotel, they have a computer, you log in. You don't know what's on that computer. You don't know if they have key logging, right? Or maybe you're at a conference and you're like, oh, I forgot something. And there's someone's like, oh, here, use my computer. Are you friend or foe? I don't know what's on your computer. So if I enter my stuff, are you gonna have that information? So don't just assume everybody's good. You don't have to assume everybody's bad, but just have that healthy little, maybe not. And then also use two-factor authentication whenever possible and appropriate. So if you are traveling to somewhere where internet or phone is not really reliable, don't do two-factor authentication, turn it off. But try to do it as much as possible because it's a no and it's a have. And those two things you need to have together to log in, and that will help protect whatever password you have for the application system, whatever. Tips for your laptop. These are easy. Password protect device. Most laptops have encryption coming in on them. Turn that on. Get your antivirus software. If it doesn't have anti-spyware, get it. The key here is just because you pay a lot of money for it doesn't mean it's the best service. There are a lot of really great antiviruses out there that are open source. I'm not going to name any of them, but one of the good things about that is there's less red tape. So they can respond a little bit faster to some of the threats that are coming. Also use a screen protector so people can't view, have eyes on your screen, and have a camera cover. So I don't know if you guys have seen, like they slide back and forth. If you don't have that, just use a piece of paper and tape. You don't need to have your camera open all the time. For your mobile devices, again, turn off the Bluetooth. Only use Bluetooth when you need it. It doesn't need to be on all the time. Avoid using public Wi-Fi that does not have passwords. If you don't have passwords, there's not really a lot of security on that. You're opening yourself up to your vulnerabilities. Use a strong PIN. 0001234 is not strong. I would also advise you not to use your birth date because that will be the second thing someone tries on you. Clear your browsing history on your phone. Again, there's cookies, there's things that they're taking, so periodically just bring that off. If you have autocomplete on, you can turn that off unless you want to. If it's easier for you to have stuff already filled out, that's great, but understand that if somebody gets into your browser or your phone, that's just giving all the information away in a very easy time. Install the updates. If you have mobile apps, install them. There's a reason why they have an update, and it's to protect you. And avoid keeping, I'm going to try to make this really fast, guys. Avoid keeping pictures and information on your device. So this is a key. So the thing about this is, so Joe asks for my driver's license. I take a picture of my driver's license. It's now on my phone. My phone backs up to the cloud. So now it is on my cloud. I text Joe. Now my license is on the cloud. It's on my phone and it's on a text message. Now it travels through space, not directly towards Joe's phone. It lands on Joe's phone. It's in his text message. Joe now downloads my picture or my driver's license. So it's on his phone and presumably his cloud that he backs up to. And now he will either email it to himself, which is another transfer, or he will, he can upload it to an app. So I know Steinwolf has that Dropbox, send your data to and use it. And if you're working with a company that does not have one of those, ask for it, demand it, because email without encryption is not safe. Things don't just go right to you just because I send it directly to you. There's a lot of little nodes that it crosses, and people listen on those nodes and they can take it. So password protect it. Do not send a password in the same email as whatever is protected or a link to sign in. Don't send those together. They should be two different methods, one phone call or a text, the other should be an email. But please don't take stuff on your phone, because as you saw, you take one picture and it's already 5 or 6 different places. And again, I gave it to Joe, so I've now lost control. So I don't know if Joe's going to delete off his cloud, off his text message. So be cautious when you do send those things. I know it's really easy, especially if you have kids in sports and you have to do hotel rooms and all that, just to take a picture and send it, but keep in mind on that. Is that me?
It's okay. And a good point of clarification, if you have a question, we're going to go a couple minutes over. If you have a question, drop it in the chat now, and all that. And a quick point to us, and this is why, and I think some folks get a little frustrated, but we do take our security extremely serious at the firm, and why we use our two-factor authentication and our secure uploads, as you mentioned. So if we ask you to give us data, as always, give it in the way we ask you to give it, because we do it for a reason, and to keep your privacy private, because we are cognizant of that. But let me check the chat and see if we have any questions from anybody. I don't see anything major yet, but if you guys have additional questions, Sarah, I see you got your slides back up. Any other closing? I know you want to give us some of the pointers here, so any other pointers?
Yes. So this is all pretty self-explanatory about mobile apps. Make sure the app makes sense. If the app is turn your phone into a solar charger, probably is not good and will take your data. Verify the developer, the company of the app. Again, if there's a single name, that's probably pause for not downloading it. Read reviews. People are very good to post negative things about those apps that are a little bit risky. Check the date it was published. So if you're looking for like a Facebook Messenger, if it was just published, a year ago, that's probably pause for, that's probably not the right one. Let me find the real one. And ask yourself, do you really need this app? Do you really need it? Because remember, every time you install something, you're giving them your data. So anytime you're allowing something to enter your device, you're opening yourself up to, they have access. We're getting better with compartmentalizing it, but most apps take, they take your cameras, they take your contacts, they take your microphone. So think about, do I really need this app? And lastly, securing your smart home. So change your router admin password. Most of them come default as admin. So if you don't change it, it's really easy to get into, and then you can get into your network. Split the network. So you should have all of your smart devices on one, and then all of your laptops and things you need on the other. And this will hopefully prevent you from having someone enter through your Echo or your TV or your thermostat. Enable two-factor authentication. Again, this will help, keep people from logging into your stuff. And then update. If you cannot update one of these devices, then get rid of it. Take it off your network, because it's not as secure as it should be. And again, ask yourself, do you really need it? And does it need to be on 24/7? It's okay to have these things, but understand that is a gateway into your house, and it's actually like in your house. So it could be listening, and they do listen. We all know that. We should all know that. Can you turn them off? So does it need to be listening 24/7, or can it be on and off? So think about those things when you set these up. They're really great tools, but don't just plug them and forget about them. They need some maintenance. They need some tender love and care. And then lastly, remember, your data is a valuable asset. It's one of your most valuable assets, and data is most vulnerable when it is in motion. So anytime you transfer it, in that example, like I gave about Joe, anytime it was in motion, that's when it's most vulnerable. So if we got really good at encryption when it's at rest, but when it's in motion is when it's most scary.
Well, thank you for going through some of the to-do list for us. I'll summarize a bit here. Josh, any parting questions or points you wanted to talk about with Sarah?
I appreciate your presentation. It was very good and lots to think about and very good subject to be discussing. So thank you.
And Josh, I know you work a lot closer because I'm newer to the firm, but could you talk a little bit about some of the things that we do around the firm and maybe Mid-Atlantic? I know that there's some pieces, if anybody would want to see them, that we can provide. But I mean, it's a lot of what I feel, Sarah and Josh, the consistent things is consistent updates, keeping ahead of the attacks that are coming, multi-factor authentication, and some of these other things. But anything that it seemed like a lot of what Sarah was speaking about is what our broker dealer is laundry listing on their things that we're doing. But I didn't know if there are any other main things that you thought or.
Well, so I mean, our firm just tries to be very proactive. So we have a third-party IT company that comes in and assesses our systems and procedures and provides us with regular reviews to identify what our threats or vulnerabilities may be. I can't encourage enough to use a firewall. I don't know if a lot of people use them in their home, but especially if you're having a lot of private data, having a separate firewall that's before your router is important, because that can protect a lot of threats before they even enter your system. And just being aware, using encrypted email, making sure that you have safe ways to share files, that your data, where it's being backed up, are they a safe company? Are they encrypting that data? So just being aware of all those things, and in our course of business, we've come across threats from clients that they didn't even know about. Not threats that were initiated on our end, but clients that have been compromised, and we were fortunate enough to have procedures in place to catch those for them, and certainly they were very appreciative, because they were compromised, and we were able to stop those threats from impacting them. And I think it's just about knowing who you're interacting with, and sometimes they're really, really sneaky, and it can be difficult. So protecting them before they happen, and then being aware of what's happening in real time is important, and we try to do that every single day.
Thank you. Well, I think it's fair to say that, like Sarah, Josh, and for all of us that are have to deal with this, we're stronger together, right? We want to, we're all stronger together. We want to be consistently learning about this. And thank you, Sarah, for sharing your expertise and time. And I know, Josh, as comprehensive wealth managers, this is a ever increasing thing, and we've seen it over our 15-year careers or so, with what was our training like at the beginning and what it is now, and it is dramatically different. And I feel that we are on the cutting edge as much as we can be, but we are consistently reviewing this because it is very, very important. And our financial data and security, I mean, guys, like Sarah said, I mean, you can really give up the keys to the kingdom, so to speak. So we are watching this for you. If you are a client and need some help with this, we're happy to talk about it with you in your service meetings, et cetera. But just to reiterate a couple of points that I thought were really cool: protect the house, make sure the blinds are drawn and the doors are locked when you want them locked. If you're going to have a house guest, know what access they're getting, and you might not want to show them the bedroom, but they can hang out in the living room, right? GDPR, that was very interesting. I thought that was cool. As a parent, being a custodian of your child's or your grandchild's privacy, I think that's interesting for a lot of folks. Catching the catfish, and we'll get a post with all this info on it. And just, I think, looking at it from a risk perspective, right? And trying to understand and quantify, and thank you very much, Sarah, for quantifying these risks. I think that's the most difficult thing, is just understanding what risks I may or may not be putting myself out there for as I interface with these new technologies. And we all want the good part of it. I want to, share with my friends and my family. I want to keep up with the people that it's hard to keep up with. I want all these great things that the internet is bringing to us, but there are also risks that we got to be cognizant of. So, guys, thank you so much. I thank you. We ran a little bit over. For those that joined us, I saw Vicky said, wow, but I didn't see any questions, so we'll close it out. But we'll be reposting this for those that are interested. Thank you all for liking, sharing. If you'd like to engage with us at steinwealth.com, we would appreciate it. And I think that's about it. Sarah, is there anything else that you'd like to add that we can?
There's one thing that I forgot to mention, and I want to do it really quick.
Please.
When it comes to kids, and you guys might have a different perspective on this, but freezing their credit, if you have a child and you open up their accounts, if you freeze their credit as soon as you can, because they don't need to have their credit, they don't need a credit card at 7 years old, right? But their information could be compromised. So I always say, once you open the accounts you need to, put a freeze on their credit, and you can open that back up when they're 18. I do it personally for myself because I don't open credit cards anymore. I'll open it up when we buy the next house. But freezing your credit can also save you a lot of heartache. So we often don't think about that for our children. So that's my one big tip, is to put that freeze on it so your child doesn't start already in the hole.
Very good. Thank you.
We appreciate all of these tips, Sarah, and thank you for making this understandable and bringing it from 10,000 down to a couple of feet, and we really appreciate it. But everybody, thank you for joining us. Hope you join us next time for our next featured professional series, and we'll see everybody next time. Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.